And I'm going to give you a little sneak peek today of the story I've been trying to get published so you could see how absurd it is, what they're reporting, how it's not even connected at all in reality, and how the media is essentially accomplices to this criminal governor because the media is saying it is safe to drink the water there when it is not safe to drink the water there. It is not. So, in a study, in a recent study, let me get it. This study was done as part of a settlement agreement. Under the settlement agreement approved by the court and the concerned pastors for social action, the parties to that litigation agreed to establish an independent monitoring program to conduct third-party household tap water monitoring for lead in Flint. The data presented hereon were collected as part of this agreement for a 7-month period starting August 28th, 2017. The 7th month was allowed for sample collections as agreed upon by the parties. Okay, this is the part that's important. Sampling and analysis. The sampling procedure was in accord. Hold on one second. The sampling procedure was in accord with that described in the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's lead and copper rule. I want to dumb this down so everybody understands it. The lead and copper rule is an EPA regulation that basically says if you're taking water samples, 50% of your sample need to come from homes connected to lead service lines. So obviously lead service lines in the street, because obviously lead is going to leach off from lead lines. And the other 50% have to come from lead pipes or copper pipes that have some type of lead solder. So that's the lead and copper rule. So they say samples were accepted from the residents and taken by Michigan State University employees to a certified laboratory where they were analyzed in accordance with EPA method 200.8. All samples had a chain of custody form, blah, 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 blah. The laboratory also conducted quality control, yada, yada, yada. So, fine. 110 samples were retrieved, and by checking, here's the most important part, 110 samples were retrieved, and by checking the latest information available on service line materials, we determined that 18 of the samples were taken from houses that were later determined to not have a lead service line, or from houses that did have a lead service line, but it was replaced prior to sampling. Based on the available government records, the remaining 92 houses are Tier 1 residencies. What they mean by that, Tier 1 residencies, is what I just described. Tier 1 means the at most risk for lead in the water. So 50% have to be coming from homes connected to lead service lines, 50% have to be coming from either lead pipes or copper pipes with lead solder. So how are they figuring out? How are they figuring out which homes are connected to lead service lines and which homes aren't? Right? Isn't that kind of important? You got to verify in some way that the homes you're testing are actually connected to lead service line. According to the University of Michigan, Flint has an estimated 8,000 lead service lines. But Edwards, that's the independent scientist who's also funded by the EPA, so not so independent, only examined 17 homes connected to lead service lines, which again is a claim not backed up by plumber verification. As Harold Harrington, a plumber with Flint's Union 370 told me, that number is highly questionable. Quote, I talked to the city of Flint Water Department and they told me 80% of them from the main street level to the valve box in the yard could be lead. It's a hell of a lot more than 8,000, I could tell you that. And that was a comment he made to me. Okay. A broader issue with the University of Michigan's study, let me back up. So my piece looks into the federal testing that's been done as well as the state testing. The scientist who was funded $168,000 from the EPA, he said he found out that he made sure that he confirmed that his homes were connected to lead service lines by using a University of Michigan Flint campus. So there's a campus of University of Michigan in Flint. They did a study. It was a mapping study that basically mapped out where the lead service lines were in Flint. So he cited that study. By the way, that is the government's records. That's what the government is using, the state of Michigan and this federally funded scientist, to claim that they are testing lead service lines. That study. You want to find out about that study? Here we go. A broader issue with the University of Michigan Flint study that I just told you about was the volume of homes information that were missing. John Gleason, the clerk for Genesee County, which Flint is part of, explained his surprise when he found out the deficiencies of that study. Quote, when Dr. Kaufman came in here almost 2 years ago and was reviewing the water line situation, he admitted they had missed, because they were working off index cards, there had been a void of between 11,000 and 15,000 homes that they didn't have any records of. Gleason told me about that mapping study. I was stunned. So that you're not lost, that study that he's talking about, that mapping study, is that University of Michigan Flint campus study. Kaufman is Dr. Marty Kaufman. He led that study. Got it? So the state testing and where that they're confirming, their ability to confirm that they're testing lead service lines is based on that University of Michigan Flint study. Want to know more about that University of Michigan Flint study? Okay. As Gleason said, there were 11,000 to 15,000 homes that didn't even have any records. Kaufman, who led the study, told me that his study used all available resources, 240 parcel maps the city had coded to reflect what the composition of service lines were, but these maps are only updated until 1984, and according to Kaufman, 11,000 to 13,000 to say we tested homes with lead service lines. This is what he told me. 11,000 to 13,000 homes had no code for service line connection at all. This is missing. The city had recorded all of its information on 3x5 index cards, like an old library system. And we looked at those, and a lot of them were in pencil and unreadable, and we decided not to use them. The city had also recorded the individual parcel maps, meaning each set of streets had a map of the property lines drawn. And it was within the rectangle of where the parcel was, they had a code of C for copper, or C to L, copper to lead, or an indicator for galvanized pipes as well. It was on that basis that we produced where the lead lines were. But Kaufman acknowledged that many properties' information were discarded as unreadable off the index cards. Compounding matters, many homes changed their service line years after being built without annotation of the change documented anywhere. Quote, there could have been, Kaufman said, regarding the possibility of homes that, based on their age, are suspected to have lead service lines, but could have had the lines changed out to copper or another material with no records of such a change. Kaufman acknowledged having concerns about his study missing a large swath of lead service lines. Quote, yes, we do, because again, the records were only updated until 1984. Plus, we had all those unknown records, and as you say, not necessarily good information on what kind of updates were made. Gleason condemned Edwards, the EPA-funded scientist's declaration and study. Quote, I think it's haphazard and in the situation we're dealing with, irresponsible and neglectful. Science is based on facts and evidence. If you're not walking down the basement stairs and looking at the piping in that house, you can't say it's factual or scientific. It doesn't meet the basic definition of scientific. So that right there is just a little part of the story I've been trying to get published. So this is complicated stuff. It's not simple stuff. So let me try to boil this down in as simple of a term as I could boil it down to. Boil is the wrong word. Let me try to break this down for people who might not understand all this. The testing being done for that testing to meet the EPA regulations for water testing, you have to be testing the most at-risk homes for lead. Obviously, the most at-risk homes for lead are homes that get their water from lead service lines in the street. So if you need to test the most at-risk homes for lead, obviously you want to make sure that the homes you're testing are actually hooked up to lead service lines. The only way to confirm that without a shadow of a doubt is to have licensed plumbers go into the basement and look. This scientist the EPA-funded scientists that declared the water normal, the state of Michigan, who did its own testing, they did not use plumbers to verify that. The state of Michigan, I believe, used plumbers for 2 months, and then they stopped using them. They based their claim that they followed the EPA's lead in copper rule. They based that not on using plumbers, but on citing a University of Michigan Flint study, a mapping study on where the lead service lines, where I just showed you on the record. This is not something I made up. I spoke with the gentleman. On the record, he basically told me his study is flawed. I'm not attacking him. I'm not attacking him because he was working off of index cards. I have on the record the guy saying this study is flawed. We're missing about 11,000 to 15,000 homes. Yet the government, the state, and the federal based their testing on this study. In English, that means there is no professional verification that was done to make sure that the homes they are testing are actually homes connected to lead service lines.